Hello and welcome to SharpHR Career Corner with Karen Sharp Price. This podcast will inform and inspire you in your quest to find the right career path. If you're just starting out, looking to make a change in your field, or transitioning into a new career, then this podcast is for you. We will be sharing tips and providing resources on topics such as writing resumes, interviewing, using LinkedIn, and networking. We will take a look at different careers, companies, and opportunities. You will hear success stories from professionals in all career paths, and so much more. You will leave this podcast with 3 key takeaways that you can easily put into practice. Enjoy!
Welcome to SharpHR Career Corner. Today we're talking to Erika Davis. Erika is a certified professional coach and franchise consultant. She helps others achieve their dreams through business ownership. Have you ever thought about owning your own franchise but didn't know where to begin? Erika's going to talk to us about the process. But first, let's get to know Erika a little bit. Hello, Erika. How are you doing today?
Hi, Karen. I'm great. Great. Thanks for having me here.
Oh, thank you for being on. If you can, I want to go back a little bit. When you first started out in your career, you had graduated from the University of Boulder, Colorado with a Bachelor of Arts in Communication. What ideas did you have in mind when you were graduating at that time?
Yeah, right. Well, so I actually went into college as a pre-econ major. So I always had this kind of feeling that I might somehow, be involved in business versus another industry. But, that my BA in communications isn't like your typical radio, broadcast kind of communication. It really was sort of a liberal arts sort of theory of communication. And along with that, I was also, one of those things was sort of organizational communication or cross-cultural communication. So there were some sort of business-related pieces to that degree. And at the same time, I was also taking a lot of marketing courses within the business school too. So there is sort of that. And I'm not sure that I really meant for that major to, suit my career the whole entire time, but I have to say it really has. So, in many different ways, as we'll talk about my career path a little bit, I think that becomes a little more obvious. So
a couple of years later, you had started your own business, and that was providing administrative and marketing support to security firms. Any reason why you focused in on security firms?
Well, yeah, there is, because I started working for Merrill Lynch out of college. So I had a position for them. And so it was sort of a progression from there. And one of the reasons why I started doing that is because, one of the tracks is to become a financial advisor, right? Take your Series 7 and do all those things. And I just decided that was not for me. So I did get recruited from a smaller investment firm a few years in, and I noticed there that they were having trouble when they transferred over a broker from another firm, and the clients, that they were spending all kinds of money and doing all kinds of overtime with their administrative assistants. So really what it was me being a little tired of sitting in the 9-to-5 chair. Sorry, I know that's tough to say to an HR person, but also really seeing a need within the company. So what I did was I put it out there like, hey, what if I took this over on a contract basis and did these sort of very time sensitive projects where I was helping them, very quickly bring over a broker and their clients and that kind of thing. So you had to understand the business, all the accounts that needed to be open. And I created a business that I had for several years before I started having babies there, and continue not a little bit after that. But I was working and doing this kind of work for 4 or 5 very large investment firms in like 4 or 5 different states. So obviously there was a need, and it really suited me. It was a very sort of entrepreneurial endeavor and very project based, which I like that kind of work too.
Yeah. So was it after having kids that you decided to go back into like the marketing world? It just seemed like that was your next move. Right.
And I do think that, obviously in my business, I had to market that, it didn't, the one opportunity, because I was working for an investment firm, kind of sort of fell in my lap. But after that, I really had to market the service, right? So, along with my college, education that was kind of geared a bit toward that, I definitely had gotten some experience and enjoyed that piece of the work too. And so my marketing director position, it was with a small consumer healthcare product, and that kind of started to happen with a big transition in my life. I actually moved from Texas to New York, and I'd actually started working for this small consumer healthcare, doing some sales and marketing down in the Dallas area. It was a great market for to get this product out there, and then I ended up moving up to New York. So that was just another sort of transition, not just career wise, but life wise too. So
oh my gosh. So fast forward a little bit, I guess, over the next like 10 years or so, this would be, it's like something that I would really like enjoy doing. You owned a book cafe in Skinny Atlas, which Skinny Atlas, for those that don't know, is really a pretty area, a really a nice place to be. And is that where you were living at the time, or?
Yes, and I still do. I still do. And actually, this is my hometown. This is where I grew up. So I had hopped around and lived in different places, Massachusetts, Colorado, Texas, and I came home and I raised my children here. So I had, I worked as a marketing director for a long time for this consumer healthcare company when I moved up here. And then there were some transitions going on, but once again, like this common denominator with, first of all, me wanting to be my own boss again. That started to trickle in. But more importantly, it was seeing a need in the community here. I mean, we're a really small town, a small village. But what I saw moving back is, in Dallas, we had cafes on every corner, sort of gathering places and that kind of thing. And we were really missing that kind of place in our town that was not just a bookstore, not just a coffee house, but really a place for people to go, not have to order a whole meal, to meet, to work, to socialize, and also to, hopefully buy books and coffee too.
Yeah. That sounds really fun. And knowing growing up there, you must have known everybody coming in and talking to the new people that were visiting the area. Like that had to be a fun job.
Really fun, I think, and it was a very challenging business. I mean, I opened it and ran it for 10 years and then sold it in 2014. Super challenging. And yes, what I miss the most are my customers and my staff too, because we really became a very close family. And it was also the first place that my daughters worked. It was their first jobs too. So there were a lot of sort of, perks to doing that, as challenging as it could be, but we were crazy. I mean, I was younger then, right? I think about doing it now and I'm like, oh my gosh, what we did was crazy. And I had around between 15 and 20 employees at any given time, and 3 of those were managers who stayed with me for most of it. But we were doing not just the retail bookstore and the coffee house and everything, where we did food, we had a wine beer tavern license, we did all kinds of live music and author events, but we were doing off-site stuff too, and we had to for incremental revenue. We roasted all our own coffee. We did espresso bar catering at weddings. I did a bunch of off-site book events, for like the lecture series was in Syracuse. So we were just all over the place.
Yeah, that is a lot.
And I kind of see that business as really my big career, and not that there aren't things moving forward and not that I don't love what I'm doing now, but that was sort of my baby.
Wow. Yeah, I did not know that it was so diverse and just not just the cafe, but in so many other things. Is it because it was more of a seasonal town that you needed to come up with some other things?
For sure. I mean, yeah, and I think that, anybody who thinks about getting into retail these days, or and I say this even for a quick service restaurant, like a franchise, you have to think about other ways, especially if you tend to be seasonal, to bring in revenue or to just get, be super creative in your marketing efforts and that kind of thing. So you're absolutely right. It was a very seasonal business, and we had to find different ways to make it work.
Now, with all of those things going on with the cafe and all the extra things that you were adding to it, how did you ever find time for another position? Because it was kind of happening at the same time, right?
True, and I will say rather intentionally, because at that point in time, I was starting to think about selling my bookstore and coffee house. So I was kind of I mean, and after 10 years and I still had my managers with me and everything, things were, running on their own. So I felt like, I could still be there part-time, and especially as we were thinking about selling, and also kind of start to think about what I wanted to do next. And it just so happened, timing-wise, that all of that kind of came to fruition. And I was super lucky to find, and actually that position, my position at SU that you're referring to at Syracuse University, and
Yeah.
was part-time at first. It ended up being a full-time position, but so I was able to transition there well, and so it fortunately worked out.
Yeah. And so, you were a career coordinator. Is that what you did? And
Yeah. So, I was hired as a dual career coordinator. So what I was doing there was helping the partners, the spouses of either faculty members who were being recruited or already had been recruited, as they were coming in and transitioning to the area, helping them mostly with networking and job search efforts. A lot of them are faculty too, so and that's a little bit of a different thing, but many aren't, and they're still looking to further their careers, and it can be a really challenging time for them. So whether it was another on-campus position that I was helping them, sort of network and go through that process, or it was more often than not a position in the area. But we were also helping them with some community integration and making sure that they were having a smooth transition into the area too.
well, that's a fun job too.
Yeah, it really was. I think it was. I think I was an interesting choice for them to hire me, but because I'm not like your typical higher ed, with all that kind of experience. But I think my connections in the area and my joy in working with clients, was one of the big reasons why that role kind of made sense for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was really interesting and fun. So,
So now we get to talk about what you're currently doing, and talk more about like what FranNet is. So you've been with FranNet upstate New York for the last 4 years. So can you tell us, for those that have never heard of FranNet, what is it?
Right. So FranNet is a group, one of several groups of franchise consultants, and most people have no idea what a franchise consultant was. In fact, I didn't when I first met John Adams, who's our territory owner in Rochester, at a networking meeting, because I was out there. I had transitioned out of SU, and I had gotten my coaching certification and knew that I wanted, once again, the common denominator. I wanted to start something on my own again. And I was out there, so I was out there networking and getting myself out there as a certified professional coach, and I'd met John. And so to switch back, franchise consulting is we help our clients, we help match them with franchises that meet their needs. So these are our clients, are people who are just considering usually business ownership for the first time. Now, it could be that they've been business owners for themselves, but maybe they have never thought about becoming a business owner as a franchise. So there's a big process that we can talk about that people go through to figure this out, right? And you can just kind of imagine going, I've heard about maybe franchising, but I have no idea why I would do that versus start my business from scratch or buy an existing business. Right. And so maybe you go on the internet and start Googling, but it's sort of the wild, wild west out there. So we're helping, there are 3,500 franchises out there. So one of our biggest roles is to help people kind of navigate through that process. And one of our even bigger purposes is to really help match people to the right franchise, because that's really important. There's so many variables that go into that. And then help them through that process as they do their due diligence and research actual franchises. 3,500 franchises out there, and I think 90 different industries, and that's what really surprises people, because we think franchise even sounds like French fries, right? So everybody thinks it's all quick service restaurant, which is kind of what we call it in the industry, but it's, everybody thinks that it's just fast food. And in fact, there are many different franchises in many different industries.
Oh my gosh. So, just kind of looking at the landscape, are there more men than women franchise owners, or is it equal, or how does that work?
Well, there still are. However, that is changing really, really quickly. So I think about a decade ago, about 25% of franchise-owned businesses were women, that is up to like over 40% now.
Oh, wow.
So that is, it is really women-owned businesses, and so I think there are something like, and this has probably increased since I saw the number a bit, but like 265,000 women-owned or co-owned, franchise businesses out there. So, I think a lot of it is just, now women have been in the corporate world for so long. Not that there's anything wrong with the corporate world, but for some, they've decided they've done well financially and in their career, but they're, maybe for the first time, or maybe they've thought about for a long time, like, I would love to own my own business someday, and they're able to, now. So it's, and, there tends to be some franchise industries that are, more, that women tend to get into a little bit, whether it's travel and hospitality, and childcare. Senior care is just a big franchise industry anyway right now. But that said, women are getting into businesses that you would think it would generally be, men getting into, like home maintenance services or home modification and those kinds of things. Because in the end, when you're a franchise owner, you don't have to know everything about what a crew goes out there and does. You really are managing the big pieces of the business, the financial, the operation, the marketing, and all of that. So, we do see a lot of couples getting into business for themselves too. But women are definitely the fastest growing segment in the franchise industry.
So I have two questions, I guess, that come off of that. One is, do you need a lot of money to buy a franchise, and is there a range? I guess that would be like the first one. And then the second one is, do all franchises have training programs for people so that they can learn?
Oh, that's a great question. So the financial piece is complicated, but I'll try to keep it brief for us today, because in one of the things is, that is it expensive? It's like, well, that's such a subjective question, so I just put the numbers out there so people can can decide whether or not that seems expensive to them. And so and this differs. I mean, all franchises are different as far as their investment range. I can give you an example based on the franchises that we typically work with. And that range, as far as the total investment, and along with that total investment, there's a lot of things that go into that, as far as the franchise fee, and also what they think is going to take to get up and running. But also, usually a franchise includes in that investment range like 4 to 6 months of capital. For ramp up time. So you think about all of that, and that average, to get back to that, is typically around 150 to 250,000 for the franchises that we work with. Now everybody hears that number and goes, "Oh my God, I don't have that," kind of thing. Yeah. But this is almost always a situation where somebody is probably taking out an SBA loan. So it's almost like buying a house, right? You have to have that 25 to 30%. Oftentimes, lately, especially with an SBA loan, they're looking for an owner to come in with around $50,000, and then the rest would be funded with a business loan. We're finding more and more these days that people are, and we would never suggest to anybody that they take out all of their 401k savings, but many people are finding it really beneficial to do what they call a ROBS program, which is a terrible acronym, but it's like a rollover for business, where you're opening up a C Corp in order to invest in your business with a piece or part of your 401k, and there can be a lot of benefits down the road to doing that. So we work with funding partners to help people figure out what their situation is, whether or not they're qualified, and then in what way is best for them to finance their business. So there's more that goes into that, but I don't want to.
Well, when you said
running about that, yeah.
When you said 4 to 6 months, and like in my head, I'm just kind of calculating. I'm thinking, oh, the number's going to be really big, because if you have to put all that, and then when you said 150 to 250, that's not horrible when you're thinking about what you're paying for.
Yeah, and one of the distinctions there too is, I mean, there are definitely like some of the fast food, quick service restaurants, or even fitness concepts, and other ones that are much higher than that. You might see investment levels of $750 to $1 million, and that kind of thing. But that's because you're investing in equipment, leasehold, all of those things with a brick and mortar retail or a restaurant that's, much more expensive. So some of these other, businesses like the home modification and home maintenance that I was talking about, senior care, pet care even these days is a big industry, are much less, are much more cost effective to get into because they don't have a lot of overhead or a lot of startup or a lot of equipment leasing, necessity that way.
That makes
So,
sense.
yeah.
And then what about training? Does each franchise kind of have their own set of training?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the biggest questions we get is, well, why would I put money into a franchise when I can start my own business? And one of the reasons is that there is the biggest reason and what people pay that franchise fee for is that training and support right off the bat. And we talked about that 4 to 6 ramp up time. I mean, a lot of people, me included, when I started my business from scratch, and this is why I believe in franchising, is that you can have a lot longer ramp up than that when you start a business from scratch. So that training and that support and that quick sort of turnkey advantages to franchise can really get that ramp up time, much shorter.
Yeah.
And franchises they can be a little bit different in how they approach that, but most of the time we're finding big similarities in how they train, and because it's all about process, right? And all about those systems of support that they've figured out. They're coming with a business that was already successful, because a business that's not successful can't be franchised, So they're coming with a proven model, and chances are, I mean, some of our franchises are pretty early in their franchising, careers, that kind of thing, and some of them have been around forever, and have 1,000 franchises. So that really differs too, and that's one of the ways in which we determine what's a good match for somebody, because some people might not be comfortable with that sort of younger franchise and really want a mature franchise. So just as an example, but yeah, so there's the training and support is one of the biggest reasons why people decide to get into business for themselves through a franchise and a sort of proven concept.
Yeah, it definitely does. So if someone contacts you interested in possibility, do you go through the possibilities? Are there people that sometimes when they go through the process say, okay, I've decided not to?
Absolutely, all the time, and the majority of the time, because I mean, if we think about it, this is not for everybody, and a lot of people are thinking about it, and it could also be just that it might be a really great idea in 2 to 5 years, but not yet too. So all the time we are, working with clients to help them determine if it's the right time. I mean, we don't want them to do anything if it's not the right decision. Neither does the franchisor if they're going to start to talk and research other franchises. So it's important to determine all of that. And a lot of times, most of the time, we'll start to work with a client. And I can talk a little bit about that process if we have time. But, and they'll say, no, I don't think this is for me, or I'm going to go start my own business from scratch, or I've decided to buy a business in my community, or, there are lots of reasons, or the timing isn't right.
Okay. So talking about the process, I don't know if you can summarize it because I'm sure it's lengthy, but
I'll try.
What does a person go through if they're interested in thinking about it?
Right. So if they're working with a franchise consultant, they're actually our services are free of cost to our clients. So it's not an additional charge to work with us. And what happens is we'll usually start with an initial chat, like maybe a 30-minute chat, just so I can understand, where they are with things, why they're thinking about this, what's happening, how do they see this, and how do they want to move forward. And also then I can talk to them about the process, right? The process of working with me, and also the process of getting into the research and the due diligence with specific franchises.
Right.
So then we'll have all of our clients take an assessment that helps us kind of determine those sort of preferences and the things I was talking about that helps us match. And typically after that, we'll have a pretty long meeting for more clarity. And then after that, I'm able to present them. I go back and do my homework and my research and be able to present them maybe with, say, 5 concepts or 6 concepts that I think are a good match for them based on all of those things that we've talked about and kind of determined together. And then they might pick one or two or three. I always say to my clients, don't start with more than two to talk to, because it starts to end up being a lengthy process. And especially if you're working full time, it can be overwhelming. So then I will introduce them to those, concepts that they want to start to initially. And then that takes them into several calls with the franchisors, webinars that they'll be reviewing. They'll be reviewing what we call a franchise disclosure document that franchisors are all required to disclose, and starting to maybe reach out to an accountant or a financial advisor, bring in some objective views to kind of help them think of things through. And all along, I'm there in the process. We do weekly debrief calls with our clients to see how things are going, what they like, what they don't like. Do we need to move on? Are you going to continue? And that kind of thing. And as far as timing is concerned, this used to take, be sort of an average of like a 3 to 6 month process for people. Once they got serious about it. We're finding people are taking longer to make the decision for a lot of reasons, and COVID included. Can't go without saying that, it just depends on what else is happening in their lives, and, how quickly they're really, really, ready to make a big move.
That is a really big move.
Yes. Yeah.
It's bigger than buying a house.
Right. It is. And I think that's why the research process is lengthy, and why the franchisor, wants to be going through all of this with them too, so that when, they may not have, 100% confidence, they do that by the time they decide, okay, yeah, I'm doing this, but they're going to have a good idea of what their best fit is and why.
It sounds like it's really laid out for them, and also
Definitely.
You've done it so many times that the people that they need to talk to and the things that they need to get set up in place and all of that, and
right,
that's priceless to help somebody through that process.
I have to say, I can't, now that I've been doing this, for a while, I can't imagine doing it, on your own. It would,
No.
Obviously the franchisors typically do a great job of, taking them there through their process, but, we're offering, sort of that weekly coaching call, but also, okay, you're going to have an initial conversation with the franchisor today. Here are questions that you want to make sure you have answered. Or, one of the most important pieces of the process when they are researching a franchise is to start to talk to other franchisees. We call that validation. Absolutely the most important part of the process, the research process. And we have, we make sure that they have, the questions that they need to be asking those franchisees who are running their businesses, and, in the end of the day-to-day life of that business and that specific franchise. So
wow. So do you encourage women to take a look at this as an option for businesses?
absolutely. And, with that said, it's like I get introduced to new franchises all the time, and I get, very enticed myself. So that's probably going to happen eventually too. But I think it can be a great option. Becoming a franchisee isn't necessarily about, a passion for a product or service that you've been dying to, start to offer, consumers, or that kind of thing. It's about the desire to own a business, and wherever that desire comes from, it's really about that. And so I think it can be a great option for women who are maybe looking to get out of corporate. It offers a lifestyle, it offers flexibility. Typically, yes, you're a business owner, and it's challenging, and it can be a lot of work, but it does offer those things, and really can provide a fantastic career, with a lot of potential for growth too, in many cases.
So if someone's listening and they're interested in having a conversation just to explore it a little bit more, how would they reach out to you?
Sure. So you can find me on actually askerika.com, Ask Erika with a K. And I can share my phone number if that works.
Yep, please
my
do.
number's 315-730-6178. And my email address is pretty easy too. It's edavis@frannet with 2 N's.com.
Okay. And I'll also include that in the description of the podcast so people will see it too. Yeah. So what kind of advice would you give women who might be a little hesitant on making this kind of move? Because it's a big thing to consider. And I kind of get the impression, and I might be totally off, but women might take a little bit longer to think this through than maybe your average male might do that.
Yeah, I don't know if so I've had several, women clients recently, and they're the ones that push the button in the end.
Really?
Most recently. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
I don't know. You may have a point there, but I certainly understand what you're saying as far as, how do I even think about that, get into this. But I think my biggest piece of advice is to just start exploring. If it's always been in the back of your mind, or if it's something that's been on the back burner, but all of a sudden you're like, oh, here it is again, knocking at the door, there's nothing wrong. There's no cost. There's no, obligation to start exploring. And to just see what happens too. I mean, obviously there's a time when things get a bit more serious and decisions have to be made, but there's nothing wrong with just starting to explore, and it's a start and stop thing. And it's all about, the potential franchisee and their timeline, really.
Well, and I had no idea that there was so many different, 3,500, that is, I guess when you look at different businesses, you don't think whether they're a franchise or not, and they might be a franchise. So
right. Sure.
When I think about it, I think of your McDonald's and your Chick-fil-A. I don't think of some of these other places. So
right, exactly.
That alone could open up doors to people who didn't ever consider it because they thought it was going to be your regular places that, everybody's known for years.
That's right. Just the awareness that it, you really could find a business that you love in an industry that feels right to you is helpful too. And I think, whether it's somebody that wants to, reach out to me, I mean, this is a free marketplace. There are other consultants around too, but no matter what, I would definitely also advise to get help with it. And that also doesn't mean just with a franchise consultant. It could mean making sure that your accountant knows that you're thinking about this, or your advisor knows that you're thinking about this, and really get the support. We also know that spousal support is super important. So I think we can all understand that, just like you were saying, Karen, this is a huge decision, and it requires support in many ways, including partner support too. So
absolutely. Because they may just have to open or close for you one night, and if they're not interested or not in it, you might be out of luck.
They're gonna be like, oh, I'm quitting my job too. I want to start working, but you guys have to have these crucial conversations about how this is all going to work too.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is the support in general, and also getting whomever's important to you in your life involved in the research process too can be really helpful, because they might be really uncomfortable with it because they think something's a certain way, when in fact, if they just get on those calls and they start to learn more about it, they those concerns can be sort of alleviated.
Well, I think it's true, having a good team around you, and I think that's in most cases for anything that you're doing, you got to have your support.
That's absolutely right.
And because there's no fee to this, and if sometimes, like that thread that comes through your life, that you want to own your own business and it keeps coming back around, that might be something that has always just popped into your head. You've got nothing to lose than to do a little bit of research, have a conversation, and just explore a little bit. And
and I think that it's, totally fair to feel like for it to seem overwhelming, but just, and I've always said this, not just with franchise consulting, but with everything in my life and all of my entrepreneurial endeavors, is those baby steps that get you there, that actually make you move in a forward direction, right? To make things happen. And, it's just those 2 or 3 things tomorrow that you could do,
and it's not as scary when you take the little steps and you're not looking over the mountain, you're just looking in front of you a couple steps, that it makes the whole thing so much easier to do. So, well, thank you so much. I've learned quite a bit that I hadn't, had no idea. It was really interesting. And I plan on, putting all the contact information out there so that if anybody is listening and they're interested in talking and asking, maybe they just have some questions they want to ask you too.
Absolutely. Happy to help and talk. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on.
Karen.
I really appreciate it.
Me too.
And thank you everyone for listening to SharpHR Career Corner. If you know someone right now that's thinking about making a career transition, but they just don't know what their next move should be, visit the website sharphumanresources-buffalo.com. We can help them figure out their next career move. Until next time, be kind, everyone. We need to show a lot more kindness in the world, and it starts with you and I. So thanks again for listening, and have a great day.